Hi, I'm Leonie West from Westalee Design, and this is our simple circle template. This will give you a 2-inch circle sewing around the inside of the circle. It is much easier to sew inside a circle than on the outside of a circle. So I've just gone through our key to get into the template, and I'm going to just stitch around this circle. And we're back at the beginning. Very easy to sew circles when you have the right template. I'm going to use the circle to create interlocking circles. So I've got a cross line marked 4 crosshairs on here, and I'm going to use the marks on the ruler to move around. So we're going to sew around the circle, and stop where we began with the needle down. Move the template across, keeping our centre line of the template in line with our line that we've marked, and we're going to sew around again. Stopping where we began. Now I'm going to move the template up, and I'm going to use the reference line here and make sure that my reference line is touching the reference line on the template, and sew around. And we're going to stop back where we began. We're now going to move the template across, keeping that line in line again, and go around the circle. We now have 4 circles interlocking, and we can stop there with just 4 interlocking circles, but we're going to add another 4 circles. So what I'm going to do is move the template across, and I'm going to line this line up with the intersection here, and at the top I'll line it up with the intersection of the circles at the top. Come back to the beginning again, and I'm just going to bring my template up, aligning here and lining up the top with the line across the top. And come back to the beginning. When we get to the middle again, we're going to do the same thing coming over to the side. So I'm going to line this line up here through those points, and making sure that this line is also pointing at that intersection. Stopping in the middle, bring the template across, keeping the lines aligned, And now we have 8 interlocking circles. Take the key away. I'll just bring up my threads. So with the circle template we can do a number of things. I'm going to use our 6-inch spiral on this block here. The 6-inch spiral is designed to go around a block, giving you a beautiful spiraling design. The 6-inch one will do up to a 9-inch block, and this is an 8-inch block. It will do a 6-inch, a 4-inch block. I've first marked a center point just with crosshairs here. So now I'm going to bring my threads up. I'm going to now put my needle back in that starting point. Always hold on to the tails when you start so that you don't get a bunching of fabric at the back of your work. With this ruler we're going to stitch around the ruler to the edge of the block. If you'll notice, I'm not turning my fabric, I'm actually allowing the fabric to stay pretty much in the same position, but I'm using the ruler to move that circle. I'm now going to stitch a back stitch across this part here. If you want, you can use your straight ruler so that it helps you to stay on line and keep that stitch where you want it, which is on the stitching line from before. What I need to do is move this template, keeping the center in line with those crosshairs and using one of the lines on the template, and for this I'm actually going to turn this around so you can see it. I'm going to use the lines on the template to line up with that stitching line. So I'm keeping the starting point at the right place, and I'm going to line that over the top of the line that we've already sewn. When I do this, it's telling me that I need to be here if I'm going to work on this line. So I'm just going to come back a little bit. Doesn't matter if you do backtracking more than once. We're going to come around, stitching at the edge of this ruler. Remember, move your hands and relocate your hands when you need to. And when we come back into the center, we're going to stop at the same point as what we started at. And we're right back in that same position. Stop with your needle down, and I'm going to turn that back to where we should be. The foot now locates on the hook on the template, and we're working on the second line. On this one I actually have stable tape. Just helps me keep this template in position, and we're going to go around until we get to the edge and stop on the edge of that square. I'm now going to sew up the line there. After you've done a bit of quilting with rulers, you will actually learn that you can backtrack quite easily. With ruler work, you do not have to go quickly. You go at the pace that you are comfortable with to get the result that you want, which is nice, even stitches. And I'm lining up that line again, making sure the center is in place, and we're going to sew the next one. And we're going to stop back at the center. And we only have a couple of arcs left to go. You can do this where you don't travel along the edge of a block and you have them floating, but if you're doing that, you will have to backtrack each one of these arcs. And we'll go back to the centre again. Just stopping in the middle. So once we finish sewing, we're going to bring our threads up and sew the ends in. So that's our finished spiral going in that direction. If we want, we can turn the spiral upside down and work the spiral going in the opposite direction on top of this one. We have a number of different spacing measurements on that tool. Hi, I'm Leonie West from Westalee Design, and I'm going to show you how we use our clamshell. I'm going to use the 1.5 by 3 inch clamshell. We have a line marked here and here. This line we need to line up with our stitching here, and this line we will line up across here. We need to be on that stitching line going down here. We're going to sew around the clamshell, making sure that we keep our ruler foot in contact with that clamshell edge as we go around. We're going to stop when we get to our stitching line across the base, and then we're going to come up and sew the next clamshell. If you were doing a lot of clamshells, you would just move the template down and continue sewing your clamshells, keeping this line in place. We're going to have to sew along the edge of here. You may wish to use one of your straight rulers to sew along that edge, and we're going to stop sewing so that we can move our clamshell. I'm just going to turn this around for you. We're going to want the clamshell to come up so that this part of the clamshell is up around here. This line is in place here, so I'm going to turn it at an angle just to make that easier for you to see. I've got to continue sewing up the edge. Having my clamshell come up here, in line with here, this line in line with the one we sewed before. They give us a guideline to keep our clamshells running straight, and we want the line across here to be in line with the top of each of our clamshells. So I'm also using the line across the bottom to help give me that reference. Use as many guidelines as you can when you're sewing. The more reference lines and guidelines you have, the more accurate your quilting will be. So we're going to come around here. We're going to sew down and stop when we get to that stitch line. We're going to sew up. Coming around back to that stitch line again. When we get down to the stitch line down here, we're going to stop in place on the previous one, move the template over, keeping it in line. When you're sewing across a quilt, your quilt will actually draw up, so the lines that we put in there in the first place won't be in exactly the same place. So we do need to make slight adjustments as we go when we're sewing. We're now ready to sew the next set of clamshells. with our foot, needle down and our foot in place, we're going to again line up this line across the tops of the clamshells. If we look here, we can see how it's shrunk as we've stitched. It brings it in. Our quilting stitches bring in our quilting. So when I get to the top here, I'm actually going to just stop and move my template across. I can't move my template when it's sitting in a ditch, but I can move my template across at the top of the shape. So I'm going to stop here. I'm just going to bring the template across just a tiny bit so that this line is in line with the one here. Keeping everything else in line, we're now going to continue sewing the clamshell. The extra stitch in the top won't be noticed, but we're keeping it in line, and that's what we want to be doing. So I'm going to look here and see that that's lining up okay there, so I can continue to the edge. When I get to the end of this one, I need to travel back up again. So I'm going to use a ruler again to give me a straight line to travel up against. You can freehand this if you've got a line to freehand against, a stitch line, or use a ruler, it's your choice. We might be close here, so I'm going to bring the template in. And having to come up here, I have to go up a bit further. So I'm just going to freehand up a bit further here. And we're pretty close now. So again, I'm going to make sure that my template is in line with the stitches from before, and that the line across here runs across the top of each of those clamshells. I'm just going to come back a fraction, and away we go. Stop when you get to that stitch from the one before at the top of the clamshell, come round, come back, stop at that stitch with your foot down and needle down, move the template across, checking out that we're still in line, our line is running across with the top again, and we're in line along the side. When we get to here, we're going to stop on the line. We're now just going to bring the template up again, keeping the tops in line with the ones we did before, and we're going to have to make a little bit of adjustment here when we get to the top again. So I'm back up the top, I'm just going to move that across. It really is only about one stitch that I'm moving across, but that one stitch does make a difference. Stop back on the top of the clamshell from before. Always check, make sure that you are in line. And we're back at the end again. Hi, I'm Leonie West from Westalee Design, and this is our Spinifex Snowflake. This is Snowflake number 7. And like our Spinifex, we have rotation marks on the tools, and with this one we can do an 11.5 inch circle with the Spinifex. We can change the key and do 9.5 inches, 7.5 inch and 5.5 inch, and this is the outer point of the tip when it spins around. With our needle down in the centre, we're going to put our template around the ruler foot, put the key in place. This is the 7.5 inch snowflake, and we're going to start in the centre, and we're going to sew out. When we get up to the top, we're going to just roll around the edge and go all the way up to the top, come around, roll back around again, back down in line and sew back to the centre. Stop at the centre. We're then going to rotate the template and come down. Roll around. Down the other side. Just roll around that template and back to the middle. Stopping. We're now going to sew this side. Roll around and back to the middle. Turning, we're going to sew up the top. Just checking that my reference lines are all in place. And come back to the centre. When I get to the centre this time, I'm going to change the key, and I'll put the 9.5-inch key in here. And now I'm going to work the 45-degree angled . And coming back into the middle. Rotating. We're going to rotate again. Roll around the edge. And we're done. And that's our Spin Effect snowflake. We can put another set in if we want. Hi, I'm Leonie West from Westalee Design, and I'm going to show you how we use our Circles on Quilts spinning wheel number 36. On this template we have A and B marked. We're going to start sewing at A, work our way round and stop at B, and then we're going to rotate the template. The template has lines marked on it, and this is to help you to align so that you know you get back to the beginning. The template has a hole in it, and we've placed a pin through the centre of our crosshairs. You will notice that you get a white disc with your template. I don't use that disc when using this template. So we're going to place the template over the pin, and this will keep our template located to the centre of our block. I'm going to move my fabric so that my ruler foot is inside my template, and I'm going to lower the ruler foot, move it so that the ruler foot is touching at A. Lower the needle, raise the needle, raise your foot, move your fabric out and bring the bobbin thread up. With the bobbin thread up, I'm going to go back to the same position I was when I put the needle down. So I'm just going to put the foot down, lower the needle. I'm going to align the template so that my crosshair is in line with the line running at the top of the template. Holding the tails, we're going to sew from A around to B. When we get to the top, it's a good idea just to stop there and continue. That way you get a much nicer point when you've got a point on a template. Stop at B. Keeping the foot down and the needle in place, rotate the template. On this template we have a stitch line marked, and we're going to line that up with the line we just stitched, and making sure that our template is in line with those crosshairs. And we're going to sew around to B. Stopping at B, rotate the template again. Lining up with our crosshairs, checking that our stitching line is in place, and go round. This is a really easy circles on quilt to sew. Gives you a lovely effect very quickly. Stopping at B, rotate the template again, making sure that we're in line and our stitching line's in place. Stop at B, rotate the template, keeping it in line with our crosshairs. You will notice that I haven't rotated my quilt. I'm moving the template around. Stop, turn again, making sure we're in line. Stop at B, rotate the template, making sure that we're in line and our stitching line is in place. On some machines the shank is very low, and if your pin is looks like it's going to hit that shank, just keeping the needle in position, rotate the fabric a little bit, and then you can continue going. Stopping at B again, turning the template, checking that we're in line on all our positions, and this is the last spinning wheel. We are now back at the beginning, and we can finish off by tying off our threads. The finished spinning wheel number 36. Hi, I'm Leonie West from Westalee Design, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to fit our Westalee ruler foot to your Bernina machine. This is a B350 Patchwork Edition. We remove the foot from the machine, and then we're going to replace that foot with our ruler foot. The ruler foot has been placed on a Bernina adapter shank, so we just put that on. once we've attached our ruler foot to the machine, we need to adjust the height. We do this simply by loosening the screw and gently moving until we have it so our fabric rides nicely under the foot. We want our fabric to float. With this model of Bernina, the foot has a slight hopping motion. So when setting this machine, I lower the needle to its lowest point, and that is the position where I will work my setting of the foot height. When we're doing free motion quilting, some people lower their feed dogs and some people like to drop the stitch length. So I'm going to lower the stitch length to 0. And that way my feed dogs aren't feeding the fabric. And it depends on which way you like to work, whether you lower the stitch length or drop the feed dogs. I'm going to show you how we sew our Spinifex number 6. This is an 11.5 inch design, which means that from point to point, when we've sewn 2 of the pattern opposite, it will measure 11.5 inches. This way our design will fit into a 12-inch block, leaving a 1/4 inch around the block, and that makes allowance if the block's a little bit smaller. We don't have to worry about the tip of our design coming over the edge. You will notice on this block I've marked crosshairs on the block, and they are what I'm going to use to guide my template around. I also have lines marked on my tools, and those lines, when I turn the template, will match the crosshairs. I need to bring my threads up at the centre because that's where we're going to start sewing. So I'm going to place my template underneath the foot, move the foot over. I will lower the foot. Now I can see through the hole in the middle the centre of my crosshairs, and I'm going to use my hand wheel to lower the needle. I'm going to bring up those threads from underneath. So I've got the bobbin thread and the top thread, and they've come through to the top. I like to tie these threads off, and we'll discuss that later in another video. So now that I've done that, I'll lower the foot again, bring my needle back down, just using the hand wheel. You can use your pedal if you have a needle up and down, which will lower the needle and keep it in the down position. So now what I'm going to do is sew around that template, and I'm going to line up my marks on my ruler with the crosshairs on the quilt that I've drawn and start sewing. You can move as quickly as you're comfortable, and when you're starting out, I do suggest that you don't go as fast as you can. When I get to the top, I like to stop at that crosshair mark. That way I don't get a bunching of stitches when I go around the corner. Stop whenever you need to relocate your hands. Work your way around the template, back to the beginning. When we get back to the beginning, we're going to stop with our needle stopping in the centre and keep the needle lowered in that centre position. So the template opposite, so I will just rotate the template, lining up again my crosshair lines and down here, and we'll do the next one. When you're beginning working with rulers or free motion, don't worry about your stitch length so much. You will get that in time. Getting even stitches all the time is just practice. And we stop in the middle again. We will now turn the template over 45 degrees. I'm now going to turn the template 90 degrees, and if we have a look at the size of this template, because it is a large design, when I turn it around here I'm going to collide with the edge of the machine. I can still sew this. All I have to do is turn my fabric. So now I'll be able to sew that template, that petal in here, and here we go. back to the centre and stop. I'm going to turn the template and do the opposite petal, and I'll just turn the fabric just a small amount. You can move it to get into the position that you're comfortable. We're just riding our ruler foot against the edge of the template. Always adjust your hands when it starts becoming uncomfortable or difficult to hold. Stop in the middle again. I've made a Spinifex using 4 petals on the Spinifex. I'm now going to rotate the template again, and this time I'm going to turn my template so that I'm filling in the space between here. And because of the position it is, I will just rotate my fabric slightly. But we're always lining up our crosshair lines. I mark the templates with a number of markings. Those markings give you more use of your template and make it easy to make sure that when you make a design like this, you have a pattern that does reflect opposite from one side to the other. I'm going to do this one because it's going to hit the wall of the machine. I will just give the fabric a slight turn. You may notice I'm not using ruler grips on this template, and I've had a fair bit of practice with these, and I put them on some templates. I don't put them on all. This is probably one that I would actually like to put a ruler grip on, mainly because of its size. We're going to do this one now, and I'm just going to turn that fabric again. Adjust your hands when you need to. Back up to the centre. Stop in the middle. And we have 1 petal left to do. When quilting, you may need to adjust the tension of your machine when you change threads. Different battings will use a different height of the foot. You may go a little bit higher on a thicker batting. But with the Bernina, this is working beautifully. The foot's giving me the guide to my template, and we're now finished. We're back in the centre. As I've been sewing, you may have noticed that we have a key in our template. We could just have a slot that moves over our foot and goes in, but whenever we sew to that slot, we'll actually get a bump in our stitching line. So the key is there, so that now if I want to put free motion stitching in here, I can just take the key out and I can now move my template out, goes over the foot, and I can continue stitching with a free motion stitch here. Once I've completed stitching the pattern, I'm going to raise the needle, raise my foot, and now I can bring out my work, and that's one Spinifex number 6 sewn on a Bernina.